New tariffs from the Trump administration are expected on April 2nd could be more narrow and targeted than previously thought. Joining us now with more Axios Trump White House reporter Mark Caputo. I'm writing this down, Mark. Definitely these tariffs are going to be narrower, and I think I got a really good feel for what they're going to be like now. I'm banking on it. I'm betting on it. I'm staking my life on it. Good idea?
Bad idea. Donald Trump is going to do what Donald Trump wants to do, and when he no longer wants to do it, he'll do something else.
Who has his ear? Because I know some of you are reporting on the Commerce Secretary, maybe, that sometimes he's saying some things maybe that Scott Bessent might not agree with. Peter Navarro, we know how bellicose some of his language is in terms of tariffs. Who should we be listening to? I mean, we should be listening to Donald Trump, but who has his ear?
Everybody has his ear. Lutnick, on Thursday, was on a podcast and made some intemperate or unwelcome remarks about Social Security, suggesting that old people who don't get their Social Security checks, if they do call in, that they're just fraudsters. Again, that's a suggestion. It's not outright what he said. Didn't go over very well in the White House. Now, Trump was probably displeased about this and getting mixed readings about that. But Lutnick and he met all yesterday, Sunday, in the White House, and Lutnick has sort of carved out a space with himself on tariffs. But you had mentioned Peter Navarro. You had mentioned Scott Bessent, and the U.S. Trade Representative. There's the Council of Economic Advisors. You have all these different sort of rival power centers in the White House. And by and large, Lutnick looks like a little more of a man out or an odd man out when everyone's together. But what the final product looked like, no one has any idea.
Where's Lighthizer now? He doesn't have an official role, does he? It still has a president's ear.
Well, he's among those who have a voice and a seat at the table. Because one of the things that Donald Trump does when he makes a decision is he likes to receive lots of input. There's a story actually in Bob Woodward's book, not about trade, but about military action that was told by Tommy Franks, or that was told by one of his former generals. And Trump went around the room and asked everyone a question about military action, including the person who was taking the notes, who was a young person, a young woman. And she said, I'm not qualified to talk about this. And he said, well, no, you're in the room. You get a say. You get a vote. And that's how Trump sort of conducts not just foreign policy, but also his trade policy, albeit he's probably not asking the note taker in that case. But this is a decision that's largely made on his gut as well as the data. And as you see, and as you said, it changes from moment to moment, depending in part how the markets react, even though he denies that.
Still quoting Bob Woodward. I don't know if that's a good idea at this point.
I also said Tommy Franks, who was not the general at the time. He was like in 2004 under Bush. So I've crossed some wires this morning.
I mean, I know Bill Murray was on a podcast with Joe Rogan, and he said he read Woodward's book about Woodward's book about Belushi, and said after Wired. After reading that, he's now convinced that Nixon was totally set up, because nothing that Woodward said about Belushi had any veracity, basically, whatsoever. So he said he maybe talked to people 10 people removed. But that's not, we're not here to talk about Bob Woodward. But he's made a lot of money with those books. Man, oh, man. What do you think? 50 million, 100 million? What do you think? That's
a good question. He's also, he has a factory kind of process of churning these things out under every administration, 1, 2, or 3 under every administration. Notably, he didn't really have one. The one he did on Biden, I know we're not here to talk about that, was looked like it was sort of ghost-written by Jake Sullivan and the Secretary of State at the time. So, but anyway, we're far afield.
Man, Jake Sullivan, basically everything that's happened in the past 4 years, we can thank Jake Sullivan for, probably. Let me ask you about these tariffs, because, see, I take solace that if the right people get the president's ear, for example, about the automakers, and say, look, if you put these on, I don't know what it's going to do to Canada, but here's what it's going to do to the automakers here. That's going to be billions of dollars of extra cost. He seems to listen to things like that. And if you were a company, wouldn't you say, look, he's going to do the right thing after he tries everything else?
Maybe. I think what's important to remember is this. Donald Trump has been talking about making America first, restoring a manufacturing base similar to what we had in the 50s, 60s. And making sure that other countries don't, quote, rip us off. And if you understand that that's Donald Trump's ultimate end game and that he's a pragmatist, he wants to be able to get there. So if that means Trump starts off with a sort of blanket tariff and a blunt instrument, and then he withdraws it and kind of refines the blanket or hones the blunt instrument into a sharper tool, that's what he's going to do. And I think that's probably the safest bet in understanding what Trump wants to do. But ultimately, he wants to use tariffs to change the United States economy by making us manufacture more stuff here, bringing more jobs to the United States, and having other countries not, quote, ripping us off. Now, how that looks and how well that gets done in a global industry, I'm not smart enough to say that. I'm not an economist, but that is ultimately where he's going. And if people pay attention to that, and to your point, if companies are able to make the case that, hey, if you do this tax policy or that tariff policy, that this will grow jobs in the United States, good jobs, not just like call center jobs, then he'll be attracted to that.
Mark, have you been surprised that, and I don't know about polls, I never know about polls, obviously, but you got Doge and you got, people that don't like it are, keying Tesla cars and, even worse. You've got these tariffs, obviously. You've got, I don't know whether I would call it haphazard policy going in, but he's got the highest ratings he's ever had. A lot of people, I guess, that are Republican, they voted for a certain reason for Donald Trump, and he's following through on things. It looks like the left has gotten even more polarized with this. But are you surprised at how well his numbers have been? And even right track, wrong track is at the highest level since 2004. Are you surprised at that? People at Axios surprised?
The right track, wrong track number was interesting. That poll that you're referring to most recently was NBC. I think some of it was taken, or it was taken in the midst of the stock market, shall we say, correction of a few weeks ago. So we need more polling to figure that out. I would explain it this way, is that Donald Trump is doing what he said he would do, or is getting caught trying to do what he said he would do. And he's also constantly out in the public, constantly in the media, and constantly saying what he thinks and what he's doing. And at least for now, people are giving him credit for that. He's at least getting caught trying.